All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining in and watching us. This is a co-stream between me and Hans Nelson and his channel on YouTube and Brian White on his channel Future Raza and YouTube as well. We do this every Wednesday. Thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to talk about all the big swings, the big bets that Tesla seems to be making now. It does feel like things are accelerating, and you can see these giant strategic moves that are happening. We're going to talk about Elon's comment about the scale of how many bots, humanoid bots, Optimus bots that Tesla is possibly going to make, not only this year, but in 2027 and 2030, possibly 1 billion bots by then. That seems crazy, but Elon commented on that. He also just now talked about what FSD version 12.4 is going to come out next week. Then he's talked about 12.4, 12.5, and even 12.6. And the big bet on robotaxi. They're also making massive bets, remind people how much they bought there. Dojo's now in production, and this new data warehouse that they're going to be building in Buffalo, New York. These are just some of the ideas, but it sure feels like that these big bets are happening now. Let's go through each one of them that we think are happening even particularly now. So welcome guys, welcome Franz and Brian. How are you guys doing?
Oh man, I'm doing awfully good. All things considered. What a, you know, th- this company is on the wrong track. They've been on the wrong track forever. We've always seen them making these huge bumbles on investments like building their own battery factory and going into bots. That's laughable. Oh wait, there's 100 companies going into bots now. So I'm just excited to see these topics one by one.
What about you, Franz? You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry about that. I think that we're at a pretty fun spot right now in just watching FSD develop, and the fact that, we're seeing these version 12 updates come out so quickly, there's a lot of implications of that. And so on the one hand, I'm looking at it, how is FSD evolving? What does it mean for the timeline of something like robotaxis? And we're getting a lot more data points for that these days, which helps to kind of clarify some of those things. But then there's, big implications beyond that. And obviously Optimus is one of those. And so excited to kind of keep track of all of that news that we've been getting around those two topics recently and just think about what that means for the future.
Okay. So let's go ahead and review everything that's happening here. We've got I'm just putting it all together because this is all breaking news things. These are things that just happened like a second ago. So let's go show this out here. Let's see. So we obviously saw that. Oh gosh, sorry guys. I thought I'm usually more organized than this. There we go. Okay. So this is what Elon just said, right? Earlier, he said that 12.4 is going to be coming out probably next week. Then he said this 12.4 has almost completely retrained models. Wow. Almost completely retrained models. The final touches are for comfort, as it sometimes accelerates or breaks too fast for most people's taste. He said 12.5 and 12.6. That's the first time we've heard him talking about 12.6, are in various stages of testing. We're getting into rare, complex situations, for example, going down a narrow one-way road, encountering a road closure, and having to reverse out to find a new route. Isn't that great? And then he goes, that closure also needs to be communicated to the rest of the fleet so you don't get a whole bunch of Tesla stuck down the road. This is it's what I've been waiting for, right? Which is memory. Like it's actually knows one particular location, a very specific geolocation. It knows what happened there. It communicates to the fleet. So for me, that tells me that maybe in my own driveway, right? My own driveway, it knows that it's a curvy road. It'll know how I drive that way, and maybe it'll know and remember. What do you guys think about this? This seems like, anyways, the topic is the big bets, and the big bet is robotaxi. And he knows the progress. They're already talking about 12.6. They have this ability to see what's happening 4 months ahead, and they're feeling very confident about this. So what do you guys feel about this? Let's start with you, Hans, because you're very close to FSD.
Yeah. So one of the things that Elon has said specifically is that 12.4 as you mentioned earlier, is basically a complete retraining of the neural nets from the ground up, and that 12.5 will be the same. And so they're taking these steps where, they've got a model and they're basically doing a from scratch training run on their larger supercomputer. And we're getting closer. I don't know if 12.4 is going to be the first one. I doubt that it is. I've asked this question. I haven't got any confirmation, but I don't think that 12.4 was trained on the cluster after Elon said, we are no longer compute constrained. I believe it was trained on it before. And so what that tells us is that the speed with which they can make these full training runs and the quality improvement from one to the next could be significantly even larger here in just a few months from now than they are today. So one of the things is the first time we've heard Elon mention 12.6. And if he's mentioning that it's already in the QA phase, that means that we're less than 6 months away from that potentially being in the hands of customers. And, it could be even less than that. He said that the window between when they do that training run and when it gets into the hands of customers is anywhere between 3 and 6 months. And I'm expecting the further we get into this, the more that window shrinks down from that 6 months down to 3 months. And so we could be as little as 3 months away from 12.6, which means that, we would need to have 12.4 for about a month,
Yeah.
12.5 for a month and a half, another month and a half for 12.5. And then we would be on 12.6 if it was 3. And then, that can stretch out to 3 months each for 12.4, 12.5 if we're 6 months away. But that means that we're just, accelerating more and more into these future releases. And what Elon has mentioned is that they are, now that the compute is not the bottleneck, the thing that is the bottleneck is trying to do all the validation testing to make sure that these new versions are not going to behave in some weird way. And the number of things that they're not doing correctly is so small that it's actually hard to find where it is that the system is breaking. And so they're actually like the new problem that Tesla has to solve is how do you architect a validation program now in a world where the number of safety critical interventions is getting to be so low that, potentially we're passing the safety level of humans. And, Holmars tweeted a funny tweet the other day. I don't think it's based on any internal information, but he just said, FSD has been achieved internally. And that is definitely the type of vibes that I'm getting from observing what is going on at Tesla right now. So I think
Yeah.
that's kind of where I'm at with what I'm seeing these days and what I'm reading into these tweets. Of course, this is all, my opinion and
Mhm.
speculation, might be wrong, might be inaccurate, might be the ramblings of a madman, as Tom likes to say. But that's what it is.
Yeah.
I,
There's
I,
an
yeah.
account user named Lord Flacco who yesterday said, "What did Elon see?" And so, what I'm the topic of today is Tesla and Elon making a massive bet here, and why are they doing this? This is robotaxi. Now he's completely changing the organization. He's making some moves, and he's made the announcement that this is coming, and he must have seen something to give him that confidence. So is this how big of a bet is this? What do you think, Brian?
So I would agree with Madman and some of his ramblings. The Elon had said only about 1 in 10,000 things in FSD training is actually useful, and that makes sense to me. A perfect drive probably provides no information. If I'm not providing any feedback and it works, that didn't teach us much. Maybe a little bit. When they said we're no longer compute constrained, this is the evidence of that. The speed with which subsequent versions are rolling out is very fast. And to Hans's point that it can take a bit of time to validate these, it's not like traditional code where you're validating what you wrote. The neural net wrote it, and you can't always see what it is. So you have to take a more cautious approach because you're not double checking your math. You're guessing what the math is and making sure it's safe and accurate. And it seems they've got a pretty good handle on that. I'd be curious to know who internally is responsible for testing those bleeding edge cases, but I imagine it's an awful lot of employees who get those builds to validate and examine. So is this a bet the company moment? No. Is this the verge of a breakthrough? Maybe. We've been hearing him say that for a long time. But the breakthroughs that we've been getting have not been a solution. They've been steps towards a solution, some of them very big, some of them not as big, some of them slight regressions historically, but this is working. And so my confidence has not been higher that the approach is correct, that the path is the right one, and that it will be solved. But of course, there's all kinds of noise coming up. What now? The stock is down. There's all fraud. You see fraud, and I'm confident it doesn't rise to that level legally. I'm definitely confident it doesn't morally. Being corporate hubris is not fraud, especially when you believe absolutely that this is what's going on, that this is the Elon has long said, I'm driving the bleeding edge build. When you see it, you will be blown away. And a lot of people then got that build and were blown away. Some not as much. Some people are harder to blow away, I suppose, depending which construction material those little piggies use to build their homes. So yeah, this is, and by the way, while I hand it back to you here, Herbert, a good time to remind everybody, give this a heart real quick so other people will know that the video is up and live. That's how YouTube knows to show it to people.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, okay, so let's go back to the main topic. We were just talking about, is robotaxi a bet the company, not just bet the company, right? But Tesla is going full on, and they're gonna build the app. They're gonna show you the whole program, the network. He's talking about, customers like us being able to put our cars into it. He said he's got to think of it like a combination between Uber and Airbnb. He said this a while back, of course, but there is movement now that you can see the companies investing in this. They've made the announcement. You just saw that China, there was news from China News Daily just last night saying that they actually did talk about using not just FSD in China, but robotaxi, as in, taxi services in China. So you've got that happening. Then you've got his comment on the bots. I'm going to show that next. And the investment they just dropped, a bot demo a couple of days ago, that seems to be moving quite quickly. And his time frame, right? These bots are now in the factory, being tested in the factory, still tests, but maybe by the end of this year, they're going to have those bots actually doing actual useful work. And then you'll see that he's actually thinking maybe there might be 1,000 bots this year, 10,000 bots next year, and certainly sold to customers next year. This is again, we're now finally getting here. Their investments in a data center. They said, Elon announced or said and tweeted that we are probably number 2, Tesla, and number 3 in terms of compute power. Number 3 would be XAI. The number 1 is Meta. But they also, I think, confirmed that they bought 100,000 H200s. And then now we just heard that Dojo is actually in production. This is coming from TSMC, the chip supplier. These things are happening. They're happening fast. So let's take a look at the next comment here, which is the bot, because this is this again yet another one of those Elon statements that we shouldn't take really to heart, or should we smoke away? Did this post saying he thinks that the production ramp is going to be 1,000 in 2024, that's this year, that there'll be 10,000 next year, that there'll be 1 million by 2027 and 1 billion by 2030. This is how many that they'll be able to produce. This is similar to all the CEOs, a number of CEOs that I interviewed of robotic companies. They said something similar, which is you'll see a 10x each year. So if you've got 100 now, 1,000 next year, 10,000 the following, other people have said that. But to say that you have 1,000 this year, that you have 10,000 next year, 1 billion, and then Elon replied saying not quite that fast, but not far wrong. Not quite that fast, but not far wrong. So this is it. If this is the case, even if it was just 1,000 this year, that's a lot. That's a lot more than anybody here thought that they would be doing. Come on, be honest. How many comments have I received from people saying you are being ridiculous? Bots will never come for decades. It'll take them 5. We just saw somebody in our community post out right there, said that, oh, it'll take 5 to 10 years before you'll see bots in production. Here you got 12 bots in the lab.
What Dr. Scott Walter told me yesterday in an interview was, if you don't believe it's real, if you don't believe it's coming, if you don't trust Tesla or Elon, fine, ignore them and look at everyone else. Everyone else is moving full speed ahead. There's a company in Oregon who's already building their assembly line to mass produce bots, because what they believe a minimum viable product is much lower than what Tesla believes their minimum viable product is. Tesla wants to build a bot that can do almost everything, almost anywhere, almost all the time. And the company in Oregon is saying, no, we want a bot that can do something somewhere sometimes. And we know that there are customers who will buy it today. For them, we're going into production. So the idea that a company would enter production this year and Tesla would be 5, 10 plus years out it strains credulity.
The speed that Tesla has, developed the Optimus Gen 2 product is pretty incredible. And so for people to not think that that progress is going to continue, or that progress is going to be very, very slow in the future, I just don't take those people seriously. And I do know who you're talking about, who was very critical of the timeline of Optimus, and I won't lambast him here on stream, but while he is a person who obviously understands some numbers in some places, his understanding of the Optimus project and his ability to even read basic tweets from Elon, from Milan Kovac, that are, they're making very clear and concise claims that he was not even aware that they had made the claims, much less anything else. Yeah, it just lends me to the conclusion that on bots, he does not know what he's talking about, like even in a small way. So anyways, when people make these claims, you have to evaluate, just because they know something somewhere else, they actually know anything about bots. And anyone that I know and talk to and trust on this topic, who looks at what Tesla is doing in this space, is very impressed by their progress. One of the things that, I'm not sure if they are at this point ahead of where a lot of the bot makers are that are basing their platform off of NVIDIA, are able to get on software. I think that NVIDIA has a really good open platform right now that's allowing a lot of other people who are focused on the hardware to make rapid progress on the quality of their software, and maybe even to a point that at this instance in time looks like it's a little bit further along than Optimus. But what Tesla's doing is they are building their own stack from scratch, and they're not necessarily relying on NVIDIA to provide them with some of the things that NVIDIA could do, but they want to have that full integration so that they have full control over their future. And that might take us a little bit longer here at the beginning, but they are going to be so much further ahead in their ability to mass produce the bodies at scale that they have the time right now to make sure that the software stack to get the brains right is in place. Because even if someone else looks like they're further ahead on brains, they're so far behind in mass manufacturing that Tesla has plenty of time to not only catch up with them, but to far surpass them.
The way I look at it is there's two teams. It's you versus me, and we've decided, we've been told, dig a trench from A to B. So I'm out ahead. I'm going to go out there with my hands and just start clawing away at it. And if you look at us a few hours later, you'll see I'm a third of the way done, and you've just finished assembling your shovel. Guess what? You're going to win. If you don't build it in a way that it's like the delays with the semi. People have said, yeah, but all these other companies were very quick to get a semi to market. Yeah, a semi with 100 miles of range and a dreadful curb weight to boot. But Tesla's trying to get a 500-mile range truck that is also mass producible, that is also profitable on a per unit basis. I've seen no evidence to suggest that the Freightliner, the e-Cascadia, the Kenworth, all those, the Mercedes, the Volvo, the BYDs, that those are actually profitable vehicles to sell, and they're grossly short on specs. Tesla's trying to make something that is right the first time, and they have a much higher threshold for what constitutes a minimum viable product. And that's why Tesla has the luxury of taking their time with something like Bot, with something like Semi, because it's not a do or die for them. And they can, when the products arrive on the market, the Model 3, when it first came out, was such an improvement over everything before it. Really, even better than the Model S. Model S was a better car, but the Model 3 was mass producible. So I think they're not taking the wrong approach.
Yeah, I don't think they're taking their time. That's the point of this show. I think that they are now going full on, very fast, going very big, and they all have a theme, which is robotics AI, right? So we just showed that they're going to go full on with robotaxi. They're going full on with bots. You see how fast these demos are going. The scale is going so much faster. They've invested significant amount in AI compute, and it's all just happening fast. And they're investing the right amount of money, and they need to invest even more. So this is why I'm happy as a Tesla investor. If I saw that they were still focused on just one thing, which is the cars, but they're not. So here they announced the new $500 million Dojo supercomputer coming to New York in January. This is the exapods, right? And then just this last week, we got news from TSMC, the supplier of the chips. They said that Tesla's wafer-sized Dojo processor is in production now. This is 25 chips combined into one. This new next-gen Dojo AI training tiles is in production now. So there's actually a belief that it's going to eventually become, I'm trying to find where it is. It says there eventually it's going to be 40 times or I'm sorry, I'm skipping around, guys. So I apologize for this. I know you hate doing that, but where is that here? It's going to be 40 times at some point as much computing power as today's system. So here you have Tesla not only buying hands over fist, right? New, not only the H100s from NVIDIA, but now the H200s. Even I think, what is it, Hans, called the B200s too? The B kind, right?
Yeah, there's GB 100 and 200 coming in the not too distant future.
Yeah, this is NVIDIA chips that they're buying. So they're going crazy buying that. He said that $10 billion worth. Some of that is actually on Dojo, but Dojo's now up as well. So they are investing their money in the right places, and it's now coming to fruition at this point. So these are the massive bets that Tesla has made years ago, right? Putting the vision cameras in the cars, creating supercharger networks, actually having the computers, right? The computers having the chips in the cars. And now we're seeing robotaxi coming to play. They started to getting into a bot years ago when everybody was laughing, going, "We're not ready for humanoid bots." That was before the ChatGPT moment happens, and everybody realizes it's perfect timing because ChatGPT now allowed the bots to actually have training, to be able to learn, to be able to communicate. That was just one of the things that happened that allows bots to be a reality. We knew that there was going to be a race for AI, and we didn't know. We all thought that all the other massive companies out there were buying significant amounts. We thought Tesla was nowhere. Now we've learned that not only has Tesla been buying, but they're actually making progress with Dojo. For many months, we all thought that Dojo was a dead project. Now it's looking like maybe it's been revived. It's coming back again. So all of these are massive bets that Tesla's been doing that seems to have come and coming to fruition, and they're coming faster and they're coming faster, and it's coming now too. Is there any other big bets that Tesla is making now that I haven't talked about yet?
I'm struggling to come to any ideas here. I would ask the comments to share with us what they think their big bets are. I do think that, and we've talked about this before, robotaxi isn't a thing, it's a philosophy. It is a vehicle, but it is also the philosophy, it is also the network. It's there is some betting the company in that regard. We had expected a lot of analysts were looking at Tesla's year-over-year growth and saying, I can see the 50% compound annual growth rate because I can see the factories being announced and built. Well, the expansion in Berlin hasn't begun. The Mexico hasn't really broken ground. Nevada is just now pushing dirt. So it's that right there suggests there's been a shift in strategy behind the scenes. These will not kill the company. If all of those fail, it won't kill the company. It will just hurt one part of one aspect, which is the deployment of new vehicles in the future. If robotaxi, let's say, magically is banned worldwide for some reason, it would just delay the plans a little bit. So you would still have traditional vehicle manufacturing. You would still have stationary storage, energy in that regard. You would still have the AI developing, the bot developing. So it is a little frustrating to me to see the delays on factories because, as you know, I'm the factory guy and I need more factories to track. But that is my personal perspective and not necessarily something that is universal. Hans, what do you think?
On the factory note, I think one of the ways in which this might be a bet the company moment is the way that all of the AI technology that they're developing right now actually has the potential to impact the way that a factory itself operates. And this is a conversation that I've had with James Douma and Scott Walter a little bit, but we really only scratched the surface. And that's thinking about, if you have Optimus and the ability for Optimus to operate in a factory, what is preventing you from using the exact same technology that powers Optimus and FSD, which is, an embodied robot with lots of cameras? You can make your entire factory smart in all of your machines, all of your robots, all of your industrial, all the old things that you have, your conveyor lines, your big arms, your welding machines, all of your conveyance, all of these things can actually over time be given some amount of intelligence on their own and an ability to be coordinated from a high level by an automated system. And that was Elon's, original goal with the alien dreadnought. And so obviously we know that this is a direction that he wants to move. And so one of the things that I just wonder is if the amount of progress that's being made on the AI front right now is causing them to go back to the drawing board at a certain level with some of their future factory designs. And if that potentially has an impact on slowing down the rollout of some of these next factories.
Yeah, that's very interesting comment. The one part that I want to hear more about as a big, massive bet that I haven't heard yet is data centers. I want to hear them say that not only did we, launch and, get Tesla China Megapack factory approved and get going. What about the others? Why haven't we heard more? I'd rather hear more Megapack factory announcements than gigafactories, and I'd rather see more of these data centers coming out there too. So this is, I think, the next thing. I think we're going to start hearing waves of this thing. You guys saw that there was a job opening for the next sort of one of its kind data center. How did you guys interpret what does that mean? A one of its kind data center?
Well, let me comment just real briefly first on the Megapack factories. I think the limiting factor there, shout out Jordan Isagi, is not actually the ability to produce Megapacks themselves. It's the bureaucratic process that's involved in connecting Megapacks to the existing grids. That seems to be the thing that is slowing down that, a lot of the stuff that's going online now was ordered several years ago before the business use cases were really made to where, Megapack just makes a lot of economic sense for a lot of different grids. So, those people are probably just now starting the process of making orders that are then going to take several years in order to be brought up online and allowed to be connected into the grid and go into use. And they don't get the revenue from that until that point in time. And this is the case basically all around the world. So until we see some reform of the regulations that are necessary to get those mega packs connected, I don't think that we're just going to see this massive ramp up all over the world of mega packs all at one time,
So
because it's not the production that's really holding them back.
So I
maybe
don't
then
know
that
so much.
sorry, Brian. Maybe then they're taking that mega packs, instead of doing mega pack factories, they're going to put into these new next generation data centers, and that's what they're going to need to be built: data centers with mega packs.
So I don't know if that's if the regulations are the concern, because it's certainly not Tesla's concern, because they're not the ones doing most of it. It's the local utilities or whoever it is that's buying it that's stuck with that. And you're right that the revenue is trailing, and sometimes, like you said, desperately trailing, because there are milestones. I wish someone would track milestones. No, I'm just kidding. Is that they get paid a certain amount when it leaves the factory, a certain amount when it's substantially complete, and then the final payment upon actual energizing and final installation complete. The There are so many customers around the world. Last we heard, Megapack still had a 2-year wait list, which to me suggests that they could build more. They could build faster, but I don't know. And I think another bottleneck could be that while we've heard that there is not a battery constraint right now, that if you were to suddenly add terawatts of stationary storage, it would create a battery crunch, which would just drive up your prices for your cost of goods sold, and that could absolutely stand in the way of that. I've seen a lot of people say all these mega packs should be put at supercharger locations, because that could maybe, instead of bringing in more power from the street or the transformer, they just put in a mega pack and then fill it throughout the day and night. And when there's a rush, deplete it so everyone gets their fast charge. The problem being, there are thousands of locations, and each one of these mega packs is millions of dollars, plus the permitting, plus the logistics, plus, and it ends up being a lot of headache all at once. I would like to see Tesla spend more time building their own megapack installations, like we've seen with, it was codenamed Gambit Energy. It was near Dallas or Houston. I think it was near Houston, and they run a power grid there. I'd like to see them do more virtual power plants. That's to your point, Hans, that is nothing but red tape. There is no reason that couldn't be done everywhere, apart from the fact that our power system is a patchwork quilt of conflicting interests. And so all of those are obstacles. They can be overcome over time.
You know,
But
the title is go ahead, Brian. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I do like the idea of, using, so one of the big next consumers of electricity is going to be data centers. We already see that, people have talked about, you can't bring more than 100,000 H100s online in a single state because you'll take the power out. And these types of installations of AI compute are, becoming more and more common these days, all not only here in the United States, but all around the world. And so offering a solution to be able to power a large scale data center with an independent microgrid that's not connected to any of these major utilities is a pathway that I think exists, and we have yet to really see anything materialize here, other than the Amazon data center that they set up next to that nuclear power plant. But I would love to see Tesla show us a data center that they're building that has all of this
Mhm.
power integrated. I think
Yes,
that would be
that's
a
it.
path forward where you really could ramp up a large scale amount of both compute and energy storage, both at the same time in large numbers. The question then gets back to Brian's point about, well, how much or energy storage are we talking about there? And, does that get us back into a pickle with our lithium supply? Um, and it's very possible that it would, because, you know, we've already come close to, taxing our electric grid just with electric vehicles. And now if you say, hey, we want to do a 2x or a 3x or a 4x on our total electricity usage because most of that's going to go to new data centers, well, you run into energy bottlenecks in that direction very, very quickly.
That's why they need Tesla. So the title of this topic today is the bets. We've been talking about these massive bets that Tesla's been making on the robot, on the FSD and robotaxi, in Dojo, in AI compute. And we're talking about, we wish that there was more investment in mega pack factories and these new data centers, which we're starting to see. It's happening. But you know what? The one thing that I think is not a bet, right, is actually the car business. And I'm very happy to have heard, when they said that they're going to use the existing production lines, existing factories to create these low affordable cars. So it's nothing that Tesla seems to be doing is bet the company. Like if robotaxi doesn't happen in time, it takes a lot longer. Well, you still have the the more affordable cars being built, being sold. And again, all these other things we're talking about, it's almost like you have to do this if you want to be in the game. You have to be spending at least $10 billion per year if you want to be in the game. And the game is happening, it's happening fast. And all these mega companies out there, they're all buying like crazy AI, and they're all racing with robotaxi. Not the robotaxis part. I don't think there's competition there, but certainly in bots and AGI, and getting to AGI, right? Getting to that point. We want it to be Tesla to get there, and they seem to be doing all the right moves. Do you guys think that there's an actual bet the company situation happening?
I don't. I don't. I see some moves that I question and disagree with, but that has always been true, and I have not. I have been right less often than Tesla has been right, but I would not say that I've been wrong every time. But on the big things, I've definitely, when I've second guessed them and just had to say, look, I'm going to sit back and see how it plays out, I was the one who was wrong. I would argue that there are moves like eliminating PR in the US. I think that's had a detrimental effect over the long term. And then the elimination of, because they still have PR in China, and they have PR in Berlin, and they have English language PR through into the UK and throughout the rest of Europe, where they are actually reaching out and engaging with the community, with people who can help Tesla's mission and get good news out. And I think getting rid of the supercharger division was a hasty move that can create a long-term negative ripple that may not be felt for a couple years, but there's a lot of eroded trust from partners in the network, other manufacturers and companies that were buying their supplies, who are now expressing concerns over their inability to reach anyone to let them know what's going on with their projects, which I can imagine is very frustrating.
Yeah. Well, Tesla can't do everything, right? So that's why they need to focus on one particular thing. And the way I position everything is that it's all robotics AI. You got bots, you got robotaxi, you got AI, you got data centers, energy. This is all where the future is. This is where all the money is. And so, yeah, you might suffer a little bit on cars, but electric vehicles also, anyways, in a point where it's not skyrocketing. It still is growing quickly, but it's a little bit of a pause right now because of the economy and so forth. So it seems to me the right moves.
I would definitely agree on the big things. One of the areas of superchargers that really we need to be seeing some progress on is the mega chargers for the semi truck. If we're going to be starting production on those next year, well, we need to start seeing progress on the charging infrastructure for that, because it is, completely unique, completely separate, and no one else is going to build that infrastructure besides Tesla. So I don't know how the departure of the supercharger team is going to impact that, if at all. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe that project belongs to whoever it is that's responsible for the semi itself. We'll just have to see how that plays out. But as you said, the big areas of Tesla's future growth are not necessarily constrained by superchargers, and I believe that they'll, whatever it is that needs to happen to make sure that the mission gets accomplished or superchargers will happen. It may have to kind of get rebooted, and there may be some things that could have been executed more quickly that will happen more slowly in this scenario. But I think that overall, one of the conversations that we've had is that Tesla, one of the things that keeps Elon or makes him so successful is his ability to wield a big hammer. Andre Karpathy says, in order for Tesla to operate like a startup, you need a very smart person with a very big hammer who uses his hammer to make things get done quickly. And so there might be areas where some things get done a little bit more slowly, but on net, Tesla as a company is going to continue to accelerate and do things more quickly in the big areas like AI, like robotics, like vehicle manufacturing. So, I think we just have to kind of keep those two things in our mind at the same time, that one area of the business can suffer while the overall business itself is more healthy than ever. And, one of the things that makes this very difficult to analyze from the outside is that, to the best of my knowledge, we've never seen an organization in all of human history that operates at the scale that Tesla operates at and has such a startup like culture at the same time. And especially here in the United States, because Elon is so much closer to all of the US based Tesla operations than he is. I think that's why you can kind of see a little bit different cultural dynamic in, Tesla China or in the Berlin Gigafactory, that those places are a little bit more insulated from Elon and his influence, and so they have a little bit different culture than we have here in the United States.
Let's take a look at some comments from the audience here. This one from Mimi. Thank you, Mimi. I don't want Tesla to forget the mission. Money isn't everything. Let's talk about that. Do we think that they're in any way forgetting about the mission? Isn't robotaxi all about the mission, right? It's the fastest way. It's the best way to get to sustainable energy. Isn't megapack factories same thing? I guess you might question whether or not the robots and AI, but if you want a good optimistic future for humanity, robots can deliver kind of that utopian future possibly. And also that I think the other way to think about it is that if Tesla does not get into it, it is happening. And that's why I think Elon is thinking that if we don't do it and others do it, you don't want this to be a bad outcome. You want to be there as well. What do you guys think about Mimi's comment here?
I don't think Mimi was talking so much about Tesla as about offering perspective on what we were saying. And while we're saying that this might be a good move short term or long term financially, that the perspective that she's trying to bring is that maybe we should step back and say, is this better for the mission or worse for the mission? And I think, for example, having more chargers out there, even if the division costs money, is a good thing. I think there are a lot of people in apartments who are just not willing to become part of the addressable market until they've got a charging solution close to them. When I was in Everett last week, there's a wonderful, cheap supercharger with great throughput next to Everett Mall. But North Everett has zero. There are no superchargers in North Everett, and a lot of people live there, and most of them are renters. It is a big rental community, and you're not going to pay to put in a charger at your landlord's house or apartment. If you're only going to be there for a year or two, it doesn't make as much sense if you can get the permission at all. So I think it forfeits a lot of that opportunity. I know Kyle Connors shared that there are still a lot of gaps in the map where supercharging, where Tesla branded supercharging doesn't exist. And I think that this division was profitable, even if just slightly. And if you can get better than 5% returns, and I'd seen estimates in the 10% range, you're beating T-bills and you've got the money. Why not just keep pushing forward with it? And seen the pushback on it, people saying, well, maybe China's going to pick up the slack. It's not the manufacturing that's the issue. It's all of the groundwork. It's knowing the permits, knowing the codes, knowing the zoning, negotiating with the landlords, getting all that done. And it is a human labor intensive job. That's why we've seen solar roofs roll out so slowly, is because they don't have the ability. If every roof is different, it becomes a mess, a nightmare. And every supercharger location is going to be different. Everyone's bespoke, and there's a lot of fiddly work that goes on that you can't automate. Everyone's wanted to automate it since forever, and it just doesn't work that way, unfortunately. And if there was a big move to automate it, I think we would have seen the department reduced by 50%, 80, 90%, but 100% gives me concern that the most competent people in the industry have jumped ship, have been kicked off the ship, have been forced to walk the plank, and they're already swimming over to other boats and sailing off into the horizon, which I view as a mistake. I could be wrong.
No comment, Franz? Okay. All right. So yeah, I think we're still probably heading in that direction. And then we've got comments from Chandra. Thank you so much. Buffalo, New York, right? That data center, the 500 million Dojo cluster that's going to be built in New York is going to be powered. I think Elon said, right? It's Omar said, oh, it's near Niagara Falls. It's great. And I've been bringing this up, right? Amazon recently bought last year a data center that's right in a nuclear power plant. They're going to need that power. So this $500 million Dojo cluster in New York is, he approved it. It's going to happen. I want them to do more, and they're probably going to do more, right? And this is what I think is the once of a kind. It's going to be powered, by the batteries at least, right? That's why you need to be around these things.
Well, let's touch for just a second on the news that, we referenced earlier with TSMC manufacturing this new version of Dojo on their system on wafer process, which means that they are now, instead of having, different of these Dojo D1 chips that are then put onto a normal circuit board and integrated with all the other components that Tesla talked about in their AI day, that they are actually mounting this directly to a large wafer. And it's removing a lot of the complexity at the networking level of the Dojo training tile. And that is exciting in a lot of ways, but one of the limitations that comes with it is that you don't build memory in the same way that you build a silicon wafer. And if you are mounting the chips directly to a silicon wafer, you don't have the ability to use the way that you normally would put memory nearby with that process. And so right now, the way that the Dojo chip works is it just doesn't have a whole lot of memory. And this is really going back to the very first Dojo chips. There was not a whole lot of memory near any of the chips. And that really limits some of the way that you are able to process these newer AI workloads, especially, like the really large training runs for something like a GPT-4 or a GPT-5. It's great for video training. It's great for auto labeling. That was one of the things that they were able to actually start using Dojo for pretty early on in the development process. And I believe that the entire auto labeling pipeline actually flows through Dojo supercomputers at this point in time. But it's not something that's necessarily going to keep Tesla from needing to buy NVIDIA H100s, H200s, and whatever the next versions are. And that's why we've seen Tesla continue to buy those things, is that there's a use case for both. There's a use case for Dojo, and they can keep from having to buy too many extra NVIDIA chips to do some of the workloads that they have that are expensive, that need to be done, but they're not necessarily as efficient to run on NVIDIA hardware, and they're able to make that work with Dojo. But this, in 2027, this new version of the system on wafer process that TSMC has developed allows them to do 3D stacking of components. And so they can take a silicon wafer, they can mount the Dojo chip directly to the silicon wafer, and then they can put memory on top of that Dojo chip. And so now you have the ability to get everything in your AI supercomputer super close together, eliminate a lot of the complexity of networking that NVIDIA has been solving with their special NVLink system. And like the best NVLink is no NVLink. And if you can eliminate that, then it reduces the amount of power, the complexity of coordinating your workload. There's just a whole lot that goes into that. And since Tesla's Dojo chip is the first chip to be manufactured with this system on wafer process, that should mean that they have a lead over any other manufacturer who wants to start moving in this direction, or then being the first to also implement the system on wafer with the 3D block architecture and the ability to integrate that high bandwidth memory on top of the chips and build what is very likely to be the architecture that basically disrupts the way that NVIDIA does AI training. And so that was the biggest takeaway that I had, is that Tesla, while Dojo has not completely kept Tesla from needing to buy NVIDIA hardware up to this point, that is still a realistic possibility that's on the horizon, and that Tesla may actually make better AI training hardware in the future than NVIDIA makes. We'll have to closely monitor the situation and see how that plays out. But there's a realistic possibility that we will see that sometime between 2027 and 2030.
So one thing I wanted to say on that is there was a time when Tesla announced 100% of the labeling department in Buffalo was laid off. And there was a similar concern where they said, wait a minute, why are you? And they said, it's because we no longer need them, because automatic labeling is perfectly sophisticated to handle the task. That's an example of getting rid of an entire department for obvious reasons, because the technology has reached the point that it needed to reach. We didn't see that in advance with the supercharger thing. And yes, the network will continue to grow with third parties, but there are a lot of ellipses in the middle of the equation that are missing. And just saying, well, we're going to expand current locations, that's already running counter to what Tesla was claiming was possible even a few months ago. And we know it's not. You can't just add more capacity at an existing place without pulling a whole lot of power from the street and maybe even all the way from the substation. So there are times when you can automate an entire task, and we have seen it in the past. If that's something that's happened, I feel like we would have heard that news.
Isn't that crazy that Tesla made a big bet on Dojo years ago, and then for years we thought it was a wait. Some people thought it was not that. Yeah, now it's coming to fruition. Now it's going to come and show us that this bet is very likely at this point going to be a winner. Now that we know that's in production, they're actually going to build data centers that has it in it. It looks like it's moving along quite nicely. They made a big bet on superchargers a long time ago, right? And that obviously turned into a major win for Tesla. As you saw all the auto companies partnering. They made a big bet on FSD years ago, put 5 cameras, put the computer on the cars. Now that it's coming, we have 5.5 million cars. What's that?
8 cameras.
8 cameras. There's 8 cameras. They did that for all the cars, so that now they're all able to. They, first saw that this was going to happen. It was a bet, but it's turned out to be the right thing. Again, making the bet on, let's go ahead and create a robot and see if it's going to work. And now we're actually to the point where it's happening. They made a bet on AI and the compute. They needed to get that, and it all seems to be happening. He launches XAI, which is Grok. And now that's going to be to the level where it can be used by the cars, by the bots. It's all going to work together nicely. Starlink, he made that bet, and some people gave this idea that I'd like to ask you guys what you think about this. It's this idea that Starlink with robotaxi with XAI's Grok, that creates an incredible new experience. Because every time you're driving your car, if it has a Starlink there, you can have high bandwidth video. I don't know if it's better than the 5G that we saw that Tesla announced that they are able to use 5Gs in the factories. But does that is that like, how all these different ideas, they all come together to actually create an incredible experience for robotaxi. It was just almost like it was planned. Of course it was planned by Elon, but you know what I mean? What do you guys think about that idea?
Well, I don't think Starlink is a necessary element of it. There are places where cell coverage is spotty. If you drive the I-5 corridor down from border to border, you'll find a number of mountainous areas where coverage is not great. But we're talking 15 minutes out of a 2-day drive. It's maybe 30 minutes in total. I think ground terrestrial kind of wireless coverage is still adequate for the job. But if we can get our eyes off the road, it frees up infinite possibilities behind the wheel. You and I were joking a while back on a different show about how do you really want the people who are running things like Facebook and Google to be running Tesla? Do you want to send your Optimus to the store to get groceries and find that they only came back with sponsored content? That's not what I asked for. I just want my product to work right. But who knows what kind of world we're getting into? And it would be wonderful to have a Grok assistant in the car where I can say, find me a coffee shop that's open, that's along my destination, along the route to, I don't want 6 miles back. I want 50 miles ahead is fine. Just keep me going that direction. And that's something I imagine Grok will be well suited to do. And, again, it also needs to be open at this hour, whatever hour it is. And also, do they have oat milk or raspberry flavor, whatever it is? Those are things that definitely don't exist on your car today, but very easily could very soon. And then for that matter, why don't you recommend a movie about blank, something that interests me, and it could give you perhaps a good or very hilariously terrible recommendation. Both are acceptable in my book. Hans?
Yeah, on the Starlink portion, I would agree that that's probably not a very large piece of this puzzle, because most of the traffic where you're going to want to, have this high bandwidth communication, whether it's for entertainment, whether it's to be able to service Grok in the car, that most of that traffic is going to be around urban areas, and around those urban areas, the amount of data that Starlink can provide in a constant square mile is pretty low. And so, Starlink just in general tends to be a better solution for less densely populated areas. And so, maybe it can be a solution for taxis that are operating outside of the densely populated areas, but you'd also think that traffic in those areas should be a lot lower. So, um, cell coverage is definitely the way to go for the vast majority of all of that traffic, not necessarily Starlink. But that said, I think that the ability of Tesla to offer a platform to serve all kinds of content, and some of it will be informed by or controlled by something like Grok, I think is, highly, highly likely. And it's exciting to think about those possibilities. I would agree on that end of the spectrum as well.
So to summarize, I think what's happening, Tesla made some pretty big bets a long time ago, and they're now all coming together in fruition today, right now. And so they're making more bets, like doubling down. But they're doubling down because the progress has happened, because they can see it, because they can see the end line coming very close to us. And so it's like much more safer to do this. It's not bet your company anymore. This is now, oh my gosh, we really have bots and they're really working as we had hoped for. We really have robotaxi and it's working like we had hoped for. It's time for us to create it seems like we better start creating the platform, the infrastructure. Let's make the announcement. Let's get going on this. We actually have bought so much compute that we now have, no more compute constraint, but we'll need more. So let's, do this. The bet we did with Dojo years ago, it's turning out that it's actually now turned a corner and we can actually make it go in production. And it is going to be 40 times more powerful eventually than it is what the compute power today. Like they've made the right bets. They're seeing the progress and they're going to double down now. It's the perfect time for us, honestly, if you think about it, because all of this actually somehow works together. Like a robot in wheels and a robot in a humanoid form still needs the AI. They still need the data centers. They need the neural nets. They need to have the training compute. They need the inference compute. And they need the energy, which happens. I gotcha. They need the energy to power the data centers. They need the batteries to power the bots. All of this is coming together. And just again, did Elon plan this? Of course he did, but there's also parts of it that you wonder. It just comes together. Like he didn't plan Grok. He just did that because he was forced to create it because of what happened at OpenAI. And when he bought X and Twitter, I don't know if he was thinking he was going to build Grok, but now that he has Grok, it's going to power the cars and the bots. It's like perfect. All perfect. So thank you everybody for joining. We do this every Wednesday. It's a co-stream in all of our channels. Brian White at Futuraza and Hans Nelson at YouTube. Thanks everybody. We'll see you next week. Bye all.